I appreciate the overview. Thank you so much again for joining. And you guys can feel free to keep introducing yourselves in the chat, but I think we will go ahead and get this show on the road. So thank you all so much again just for spending your evening with us. We really appreciate it. And I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name's Bené Hershon. I'm the Community Engagement Director of the Cheshire County Conservation District. I'm based in Keene. And I think we have a few other district staff, and I'm here tonight with my colleague Amanda Littleton, who's the district manager, and Amanda will be kind of moderating our chat tonight. As I share my screen, and if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to, pop them in the chat, but I just might not see them. So Amanda will be in the chat, just letting me know as questions pop up. And we'll probably be dropping some information throughout the evening that is linked to multiple websites. So we'll be sure to include those links in the chat as well. And I think we have a few other district staff. I thought I'd seen Lisa was on here for a second. Oh, there she is. Lisa, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lisa Moore, and I'm with the Belknap County Conservation District as their program coordinator. And we do have several climate grants that are in process or have completed.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lisa. And so any folks who are in Belknap County, if you have any questions, you can feel free to connect with Lisa one-on-one, and take a deeper dive into your projects. So just a brief overview of what to expect for tonight. We're kind of just going to go over the basics of this grant and kind of take a deeper dive into the nitty-gritty of, what the grant funds, an overview of our timeline this year, and tips and tricks to kind of really beef up your application for this grant cycle and what we're looking for. And then we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. And this will be an opportunity to really brainstorm, bounce around ideas. And I just want to reiterate that all 10 of the New Hampshire Conservation Districts were so excited to be able to offer this grant opportunity again in 2025. And I think if you can take anything away from our info session tonight is that the district staff, we're really here to serve as support for you all in your application, and we want to see your application be as successful as possible. So feel free, and I think we'll include the link in our follow-up email as well, just with all of the contact information for the different districts. And you can always feel free to contact your district individually with any specific questions following tonight's info session. Alrighty, so we already kind of covered introduction, so we'll skate right past that. And just an overview of what this grant is and its mission. So this is the New Hampshire Conservation District's Climate Resilience Grant. And our mission is really to support and empower local farmers to build climate resilience throughout the Granite State. So this grant funds two types of broad projects. I think we'll kind of get into this later on, but the real beauty of this grant is that it really allows farmers to utilize these funds in a creative way to really best match their farm's needs, while also mitigating. So that's reducing the impact of agriculture on climate change through greenhouse gas emissions reduction and carbon sequestration, as well as that adaptation goal of, bulking up the resiliency of New Hampshire farms in the face of a changing climate. And just to note, when all the districts gathered to establish this program, this was really designed with a high level of farmer input to really ensure that the most pressing needs of farmers will be met. And the conservation districts really worked in close partnership with conservation partners to ensure that this program would fill the gaps that are currently not being adequately met by federal funds. Let's dive into eligibility. So to apply for this grant, to be eligible for this program, number one, you have to be a farm in New Hampshire, which I think everyone so far has met that criteria. Eligible farms must be selling direct to consumer or through wholesale markets for at least 2 years. Farms must have secure access, so that can be owning or leasing to land on which the operator is farming. So if you're a farm that's leasing, the lease would have to be in writing, and would have to be a term long enough for the farmer to complete the proposed project, in order to see a return in that investment. So unfortunately, if you're operating on a short-term lease model, this grant just may not be a good fit for you, and you wouldn't be eligible for this grant. Additionally, to receive funding, a farm must also operate in compliance with all applicable federal, state, and local regulations. So eligible projects, we're going to go through the different categories of funding through this grant. But broadly speaking, the 10 New Hampshire County Conservation Districts request proposals from farms who seek to fund to make investments in the following areas. But before we dive into all these different, topic areas, I just want to say that we welcome proposals for projects that are not represented on the list below, as long as they are aligned with the mission and goals of the program. So if you are, having an idea that is not on this list, I'd encourage you to consider whether that project will help your farm be more resilient in the face of a changing climate, if it's going to meet your farm's conservation goals, as well as those adaptation and mitigation goals related to a changing climate. And I also just want to note that every year when we go into, renew all of our application materials for the grant round, I feel like every year we're really adding new project areas. And so in a lot of ways, this grant program is really taking inspiration from farms throughout the state. So we are always welcoming new and creative ideas. This grant is really intended to inspire innovation and to support innovation throughout the state. So we would also love to hear your ideas tonight if you don't see them on this list. So the first category of eligible projects through the climate grant are projects that include practices which promote minimizing soil erosion and maximizing carbon capture. So that can include cover cropping, transitioning to reduced or no tillage, mulching projects, windbreaks or buffers, equipment and materials to promote healthy soil practices. Past projects have included silage tarps, roller crimpers, or other low or no-till implements. Other projects include transitioning to rotational grazing and grass-based systems. That can include fencing as well, crop rotation, fixing gullies on fields to stop further soil loss, soil nutrient management, soil carbon monitoring and testing, as well as soil sensors. So our next, category of eligible projects are practices which promote sustainable water management. So that would include waste or manure storage and management, runoff capture and reuse, riparian pollinator buffers and plantings, efficient irrigation systems, efficient well systems, and water sensors. Another really exciting development in this grant is that we're really excited to continue to fund projects that promote energy efficiency and renewable energy. So that could include solar pumps or panels, LED lighting, energy efficient technology, efficient cooling systems such as CoolBots for storage, climate batteries, as well as insulation. Now, a new category this year, the grant has always funded integrated pest management or IPM practices. So that can include fruit and vegetable netting or weather stations and sensors. But this year, we're also taking into consideration livestock management, especially after last summer, just with the intense heat that we're seeing an increase of that occurring in New Hampshire. So another eligible project this year would be management and infrastructure for livestock to deal with issues of heat stress. So that could be shade structures or barn fans. So priority will be given to projects that focus on both climate change mitigation or adaptation. I really encourage you. I feel like I'm always someone who tends to jump the gun. I love to, when I have an idea and I just want to apply for something, sometimes I don't take the time to really read over the request for proposals and the application guidelines. So I would just encourage you all to really take the time to comb through that request for proposals or RFP document and just follow the application guidelines. Sometimes a really great project idea just doesn't end up getting funded because folks might, skate past an application guideline that was pretty important. Projects that will also be given priority should have a detailed plan for project implementation, education, long-term maintenance, and sustainability. And I would just encourage you, like in your application, to really be as clear as possible. And when you're going to submit your application, to read through it as if to read through it with the perspective of someone who might not know all the details of your farm. I think sometimes we get so lost in the weeds that we sometimes forget that things that might be really clear to the person filling out the application just might not be included in the application itself. It might not be something that we know about your operation. So just making sure to include as much detail as possible is always really amazing. Projects that have a strong track record of success and are scientifically supported by partner agencies are more likely to get funding. We always want to encourage that, creativity and that experimentation, but we also want to make sure that these projects are going to be successful, and we want to set you up for success as well. Projects that provide opportunities to partner with local conservation districts to offer community education, as well as to share your project story or testimonial through publications or social media. One of the really amazing things that we've seen through this grant is that opportunity for farmer to farmer peer learning. And it's also a really great opportunity to show the success of the project on your farm and to really bolster your farm story as well. So we're always looking for opportunities to partner with farmers in our districts. So just something to consider as you're planning out your application, just thinking of ways that there might be opportunity for other folks to learn from your project. Another example of priority projects would be projects that provide opportunities to partner with local conservation districts and partner organizations to monitor your project and to assess project implementation and results for future programming and research. I think that could be a really exciting opportunity. For example, if you're doing a project that focuses on nutrient management, or maybe you're improving your farm's soil, it's always really exciting for our project partners to be able to learn from farms that are actually implementing these practices directly in our own counties. So a little bit of an overview of funding and what will be funded, and then we'll move on to what the grant does not fund. So this grant funds the implementation cost of your practice, material costs, architectural, land planning, and engineering services, as well as other direct expenses. Another really exciting thing is that this grant does fund equipment, but all equipment purchased through grant funds must be new and under product warranty. In the case where this is not possible, maybe, we've seen a lot of impacts as a result since the pandemic of equipment taking a long time, or maybe, the equipment that you're looking for, it might not be possible to get in New Hampshire. We just ask that the equipment must have a lifespan that justifies the investment of the grant funds. Funding is also available for technical assistance, as well as consultant and legal services. Funding will not go towards advertising, research and feasibility studies, efforts that don't lead to increased climate resiliency through adaptation or mitigation, experimental projects, and projects that have already been installed. So this is a really important thing to note. We just ask that if you are applying for a project, that it not be a project that has already begun. Unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to fund a project like that. So just something to keep in mind, especially we've had folks reach out in the past who have, been seeking funding on like multi-year projects. Projects like that just wouldn't be a fit for this program. So this grant will provide a cost share program for farms. So the grant covers up to 75% of project costs, not to exceed $10,000 per farm. Farmers are responsible for covering 25% of project costs. So that's, an important percentage to note and to be aware of going into this. And just another note that this grant is comprised of two different funding pools, one for regenerative and ecological practices. So those soil health categories, the water and the IPM and livestock categories, and then another pool for renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. Each pool does have limited funds and funding is competitive. Last year, I want to say we funded over 45 projects throughout the state. And each year we are finding that this grant is becoming more and more competitive. So just something to keep in mind. And the grant will provide a cost share program for farms. So the grant covers up to 75% of which I have already said, but just to reiterate, that 75% of project costs are covered, but not to exceed that $10,000 per farm. Alrighty, so just an overview of the grant timeline for this year. So your proposals, your applications are due on February 1st. February through March is when the districts will go over the different applications. And during this period, you might hear from your conservation district for additional information to clarify your project. Sometimes we are seeking additional information, so just important that during that timeline, if you do go ahead and submit a proposal, just to keep an eye on your email, your inbox, as well as your voicemail. We might be trying to contact you. By March 31st, all applicants are notified of their funding decision. Whether you were funded or not funded, you will hear from us. And if you are awarded funds in 2025, the expectation is that your project must be completed as well as your final report and photos by December 31st of the following year, so 2026. Additionally, if you are awarded funds through the grant, we ask that successful awardees provide a signed contract as well as proof of liability insurance. So just something to keep in mind now, so that later on, if you are awarded funds, you're not caught in a situation where you have to, rush into an insurance policy or anything like that. And if you have any questions about any of these required materials, you can feel free to reach out to us. So let's jump into how to create a strong proposal. So as I said before, I think the biggest key step is really just to review that request for proposals and the application and really make sure that you're answering all of the application questions and following the instructions. I think another thing is to really take the time to research your budget and plan, and make note of that research in your application. Let us know what went into creating this proposal. I think as much detail as you can include is only going to help. Sometimes in the past, we've gotten applications where we get like a one-line answer, and being concise is one thing, and that's fantastic, but it's really important to also include those important details. We want to hear about this project. We want to have an understanding of it. And so we're not looking for, an endless amount of paragraphs. We don't want this to be an overwhelming process for you. We don't want this to be a huge time sink, but there should still be time devoted to this application process. And so we always just say to include as much detail as space allows, because everyone on the review committee really benefits from it, and it's what's going to give your application. It could be one of those things that really gives your application that edge that it needs to get funding. Another thing that we always encourage is to include any relevant supplemental materials. So this year we are asking for folks to include a map of their project site, where they plan to install their project. And there's details on that within the application and the request for proposals. We're certainly not asking for anyone to be an artist by any means. It could be a screenshot of a map on Google Maps, or it could be a rough drawing of just your property and where you're planning on implementing your project. We also ask you to consider to include quotes for materials, or any other relevant supplemental materials. Maybe you're working with one of our technical service providers, and we have a slide actually devoted to that. We'll address that as well. But for example, if you're working on a project with the NRCS, maybe you're working with a crop consultant, any materials that they've provided to you that you think would be helpful in creating your proposal, feel free to include those materials. And I would just encourage you, I think being on this call is an awesome first step in creating that strong proposal. And just be sure to contact your district with any clarifying questions. If you have any follow-up, it's, I can't speak for all of the districts throughout the state right now, but Amanda and I in Cheshire County, we're always happy to take time to read over your application prior to submitting. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. We all want to see your project succeed. We want to be able to fund them. So taking the time now to answer those questions, rather than the week before they're due, is always really appreciated. Alrighty, so just a note on that technical assistance advisors. So the districts did when we went to create this program, we created it with a high level of input from our community partners and technical assistance providers. And so we encourage interested applicants and awardees to really work with providers in determining best projects to meet their farm needs and climate adaptation and or mitigation goals. So we are really encouraging you to consult with this network of providers to ensure sustainable implementation of awarded projects. So please be sure to note in your application if you have consulted with a technical assistance provider, in what capacity you have consulted with them, and which technical assistance provider you are working with. That way, I think it's just helpful for us to get a better understanding of the amount of, if someone is working one-on-one with you to ensure your project success, that's something we want to hear about. It would also just be helpful to know who you're working with so that if we have any follow-up questions for them while we're reviewing your proposal, we can directly reach out to them. And here's just an example of what technical assistance throughout the state looks like. So maybe you're working or interested in working with the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, UNH Cooperative Extension, the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Districts also has conservation planners working with folks throughout the state. And the list can kind of go on. But there's folks throughout the state who are available to help you. And so, regardless of whether you pursue, maybe you hang up from this call, you decide this opportunity, it's not right for me in 2025. Maybe I want to look towards it in 2026. I would really just encourage you to consult this list and reach out to these folks because they're really eager to help you meet your farm's conservation goals. Yeah, we love working with them as well. And I think we can all benefit from seeing a more resilient, farm system, farm and food system throughout our state. Alrighty, so I threw a whole lot of information at you all tonight. And so I'd love to just open it up to any questions. And this is really an opportunity if you have questions about the application, the grant program, or if you have a project in mind and want to do some brainstorming, we'd really love to just take this time to go over that. I see Sarah, you have your hand raised. You can feel free to unmute and go ahead. Alrighty, Sarah, I'm not sure if you had meant to raise your hand with a question, but feel free to let us know if you do have a question. You can feel free to unmute. But does anyone else have any questions that they would like to ask? Or any project ideas that they'd like to take the time to brainstorm? Oh, no, we didn't hear you, Sarah. Do you want to go ahead and try to unmute again? Yeah, no, we can't hear you, Sarah. I wonder if it might be your microphone. Do you want to try to type in your question in the chat?
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, just on the budget like the narrative on the budget, I just wasn't sure how much detail I should get into. So for example, I have a vendor quote that breaks out, like a bunch, like a dozen different pieces of equipment that are all part of this this equipment upgrade, and
Yeah.
I think my question is just sort of at what level of detail should I get? In other words, should I sort of explain what each piece of equipment on this quote is for, or is it just sort of implied that there'd be, to upgrade a piece of equipment, there would be several components to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be really helpful. And correct me if I'm assuming it's like Maple equipment, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a maple
Yeah.
evaporator, and there's the vendor quote there's just different pieces to it. So there's valves and sight glasses and floats. Like, the equipment, it doesn't come, you sort of pick a base model and then you sort of fill out the rest of the equipment. You sort of select the rest of the equipment that are necessary. So there's all these sort of like pieces of equipment that go along with
I gotcha.
the evaporator.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be helpful in that budget justification narrative to really just include what if you wanted to include a paragraph or a few explanatory sentences
Mm,
as to why those different pieces, why you chose those different pieces of equipment, why they would support efficiency and your project's goals.
mm.
I would also just encourage you, that detailed quote that you received, just to include that as a supplemental, document when you go ahead to submit your application. I think that would be really helpful for us to be able to see that breakdown.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. That's helpful. Thank you. And then just sort of one other quick
Yeah.
question. I didn't see it listed here, but just to confirm, it doesn't look like, if I understand it correctly, it doesn't look like you're required to have insurance on the equipment. Is that correct?
No, you're not, yeah, not required to have insurance on the equipment, but on the farm business, for, the liability insurance.
Yep.
So that's what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. And I see Sarah wrote in the chat some examples of cost share.
Put them
Uh,
on us, yes, and we'll just kind of chime in when we get a free moment.
um, Amanda, would you be able to, I'm kind of drawing a blank on
Sure.
examples of some cost share.
Sure. Hi, folks. I think great example of cost share for farmers to cover the 25% minimum of their share of the project can be started with considering your own in-kind time and equipment use. And so I did just put in the chat a form for an in-kind tracking form that if you're successful with your application, we would provide to you. So we would ask you to consider using your time at $40 an hour and your equipment, say if you're utilizing a tractor or doing excavation on a project or something along those lines, at that rate of $40 an hour as well for the equipment. So we would ask the farm to track this on a form and then be able to provide it as part of the budget justification at the end of the project to show that you did indeed put in the minimum of 25%. That's one way that you can do it. And in the budget for the application, we would just ask that you estimate to the best value how many hours that you would be utilizing equipment or how many hours of your staff time you plan to put into it. And I just want to clarify that farmer staff time and farmer equipment time is fantastic as an in-kind match to cover your 25% minimum, but we can't pay for it. So when you put it into the budget, please do put it into the match column that's there for you to be able to put it in. Another way outside of a farm's time and equipment is that oftentimes what a farmer is purchasing say if they're purchasing a piece of farm equipment, or we could use Michael's example, like the evaporator for his maple operation for energy efficiency. Perhaps the total of all of that equipment will end up being, say, $15,000. We know that our grant can only cover up to $10,000. If a farmer is willing to commit that they're going to use their own working capital to purchase the rest of the equipment, the $5,000 remaining, that more than covers their 25% match, which at $10,000 grant would be a requirement of $2,500. So those are just two ways farmers are covering the match. It's with their own working capital or with their match of their time and their equipment use to complete the project. Some other ways that could be done is also through other grants. These are not federal funds, these are private funds. And so sometimes a farmer will have another federal grant that they're utilizing on a project, and that could also be considered a match, as long as we're careful about, not double dipping and that the funds have to be used for different components of a given project.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amanda.
I have a question. Sorry, I don't have my camera on. I'm multitasking at the moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had actually applied last year in my conservation district. When they reached back out to me, they said last year was super competitive. So I was looking to do something along the same proposal because I have not completed the project. I was looking into automatic watering systems that are energy efficient and don't require like a heating element for the winter months. Is that something that, is a good idea for the project, or should I look for, different alternatives?
Yeah, I think I'm just racking my brain. I'm trying to think if we've done an automatic watering system project in the past, and I believe other districts have. Yes, I'm getting the thumbs up from Amanda. So I would say, Christina, the big thing in your proposal would be outlining how that automatic watering system is going to support your farm's needs and being really clear on that. And I think also just highlighting I think it could fall under both that mitigation or adaptation category if you really think about it. Because you're reducing the amount of energy by, having a more efficient watering system. And you're also increasing your farm's resilience in the face of a changing climate as well. So there's that adaptation piece. So I would just really take the time to outline how it's going to kind of hit all of those different marks. And could you remind me where you're coming from tonight, what district?
So I'm in Coos County. I was working with Whitney last year.
Okay, perfect. Well, I would honestly encourage you to reach out to Whitney, and see if Whitney may be able to read over your application before you submit it, especially because you had applied last year. And I think the way it works through this grant is that every county has their own private applicant pool. And so we have, for example, in Cheshire County, we have our own group of different experts that we gather to review those applications and to go through that process. And so your conservation district, your county really has an understanding of the folks who will be at that table and ultimately reviewing your application. And so I think that's also another great step would be to touch base with Whitney and see if she has any feedback on your project or has any other follow-up questions. But I think as if you are just clear and concise on how it's going to support your farm and it's going to support the adaptation and the mitigation piece, I think that's an awesome project.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I had worked with I think it was Will Hastings a little bit from UNH as well. Is there anyone else specific that you would recommend for this particular project?
I'm trying to think for watering systems, and no one's really coming to mind, but Will is phenomenal. And
Okay.
I've heard that he's done awesome work in your county specifically through this grant. So, it might make sense to even like circle back to Will.
Okay.
And, definitely make note on your application. If you hadn't noted it on your last application, that you have worked with Will. And I would just, when you go ahead to submit this application, honestly, before you submit it, I would touch base with Will and see if he has any ideas on implementing that system on your farm.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I saw that Hannah had their hand raised. Hannah, did you want to unmute? Oh, I think they may have gotten disconnected from the call. Alrighty, any other questions? Yeah, Eric, go ahead. You can feel free to unmute.
Hi, thanks for doing this. My question would be, we had a fire and we want to change things around a little bit and put in a solar array and get away from fossil fuel use as much as we can, particularly with heating and cooling and refrigeration. So if we work with some of the service providers from the solar companies, does that count, or does that have to be within some of the agencies in the state that you've already listed?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to think. I feel like if you have found a really great solar provider that works with you and works with your farm's needs, I think that's fantastic. I think as you're looking, if you're looking at different quotes for different service providers for solar, I think you could feel free to reach out to one of our state partners just to see if they're familiar with that specific solar provider. But you definitely, that our list of, technical advisors, it's not a requirement. And we encourage you to work with anyone that you feel is going to meet the needs of your farm in the best way possible. I think just like a cautionary note, would just be, I feel like the only thing I see a lot and the benefit of maybe consulting, one of the service providers listed, is just to make sure that the person you're working with is reputable. I feel like a lot of solar companies keep popping up, and some of them have, worked with more farms than others. But I think it sounds like an awesome project. I'm sorry to hear that you had a fire on your farm. But what an awesome direction to be going in. I think sounds like it would be a really great thing to apply for. And I see Lisa has her hand raised, so I'll go ahead and hand it over to her.
Thank you, Benet. So Eric, I would just throw this in that one of our applicants has been working with solar, and he got bogged down time-wise with the town approving changes to the land use and things like that. So I would just leave enough time to be working with your town on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, we've gone through all the hoops that we think we need to go through.
That's awesome.
And it's just a matter of the timing is the important thing, because the fire was actually last January and we just started yesterday on reconstruction. And so we've gotten quotes and we're trying to decide whether or not to pull the trigger on a contract, but they're right now 6 months out as far as actual construction on any solar installation. So I'm wondering if we sign a contract now, is that not going to be eligible to do anything as far as the solar goes, given the time frame?
Hey, Eric, it's Amanda. Just jumping in. So you're saying, just to make sure I heard it correctly, that you would be signing your contract now with your company to try to secure the contractors to be able to do the work, but your project wouldn't actually be underway until later in the year after you found out whether you received the grant funds or not.
Yeah, right now they're about 6 months out as far as, we just wanted to get in the queue now,
Yeah,
because we're already a little behind schedule.
that would not
construction.
make you ineligible. Your signing of a contract would not make you ineligible. I think it just indicates even that your project's level of readiness is that much further along.
Yeah.
Because you've already secured a reputable contractor. As Benet said, that's a really key consideration. And I know you're working, who you're working with, I think they are. So, but the fact that you have somebody secured and you're in the queue would be, I think, really seen as more of a positive than a negative for your application.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
I agree, and thank you, Amanda, for jumping in. I appreciate it. And Eric, I would just add to note in your application just to, clarify so that nothing's left for assumption, just to make sure to clearly state that the project has not actually begun. And just to share what you just shared with us, that you were looking to get in the queue, and I think that, we're looking for projects that will wrap up by December of 2026, and you're really putting yourself in line in order to do that. So I think that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for joining tonight. Go ahead. Say something. You're on.
Oh. Hey guys, just had a
Hi.
quick question.
Yeah.
Well, being a horse farm, we're looking mainly for, say, like a sustainable, like system for our manure that
Yeah.
we used to have somebody haul it off. But obviously he can only haul so much and nobody really wants horse manure. So I guess, if you have any bright ideas off the top of your head, that would be like a good system for a reoccurring, uh, I don't, I don't know what we would do other than, try and spread it, which we've tried to do, but obviously we can't put it in the pastures because then the horses don't graze. So we're just trying to think of something that's sustainable and we don't have a mountain of manure kicking around for a year at a time,
Totally.
And obviously we don't want it trickling into any sort of water source or anything like that, which unfortunately we have water sources everywhere around us in Epping. So it's been a bit of a struggle. So again, I don't know if you have any good ideas other than just constantly having it hauled off.
Can I jump in for a second, Benet?
Yes, please do.
I guess the first thing that I would consider would be if you've had anyone from NRCS, one of the conservation planners from USDA NRCS, come to your property yet to do a site visit. Have you
No,
guys
we have
had
not.
that? So that's a free service that you can call and get someone to come
Okay.
do a site visit, and they'll do a walk around your property and talk to you about
Lose them again.
your resource concerns, and they can start to provide you with some solution ideas. They might have some funding that goes along with it, or they might just have some thoughts on what you could do as a recommendation that you could utilize as a plan to apply to this grant program with.
Can I jump in for a second?
Oh, yeah.
Did you say you're in Fremont?
I think they may have lost their signal.
Oh.
But I think they're in Epping.
Oh, Epping, that's right. I'm sorry. The best thing to do is call Matt Larkin at the Rockingham County NRCS office in Epping.
I have done that actually.
Has he come out to the farm?
Not yet. I just started emailing with him last week.
Yeah.
So,
I'm gonna
Right.
jump in for a second if that's okay. Can you hear me, Hannah?
yep.
Yeah, we can now.
My name's Ilana. I'm a conservation planner with NHACD, but I'm a partner planner with NRCS located in the Epping field office. And it sounds like what you've described, some of your concerns and goals would definitely align with some of the programs that NRCS offers for different types of manure management systems. So I'll just put my email in the chat and I'd be happy to follow up with you this week or next to try and, actually get something on the books. It's a pretty busy time right now, so apologies if Matt has been a little delayed. But we do have a new round of funding coming up and applications are, you're welcome to apply at any time of the year. So I encourage you to just reach out. We can get the ball rolling if that would be
Okay.
cool.
Yeah.
And I have a wild and crazy idea. I just Googled real quick, and I don't know if it would even work in New Hampshire, drying horse manure to burn as fuel, making horse manure briquettes. Just an idea.
I mean,
I'm
if
just,
we had the additional time for that, I'd be so open for it, but
there's a YouTube. I'll watch it afterwards. Take care.
all right. Interesting. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. And I just want to say, I wasn't sure how much of it, I know your signal was coming in and out. But just to reiterate, Amanda had said, NRCS is a really great avenue, just to
Yes.
get that, that site visit. And even if, for some reason, folks in the office are bogged down and can't get to you directly, in a speedy timeline, even a phone call just to get an idea of what could be done on your farm. I think that would really help your proposal. I think it's, something we hear a lot all the time is that, I mean, I guess it's just the reality of having a farm with animals is that there's a constant source of it and there's not always a really great way to handle it. And so I think you guys are definitely on the right call and in the right place. And
Yay.
I think that I'm hopeful that NRCS can come up with some creative ideas to help you guys out. And hopefully this grant could also serve as an opportunity to also help this so that hauling constantly does not sound ideal. And so I just want to reiterate that I think that there could be a really great fit for this grant, as well as working with NRCS.
Okay. Great to know. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Any other questions from folks?
I don't have any other questions. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to go over this with everyone tonight. It's very informative.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. And thank you guys for taking the time, especially on this disgusting night. I don't know if it's gross where you all are, but right now I'm just hearing I know we needed the rain, but it's never like a pretty thing when it finally decides to show up. But thank you all so much for joining us. I know it's a busy time of year. And we're actually coming up on our time. But I just want to thank you all again for taking the time to be here. And just to reiterate that the districts, we're really here to help you guys. And that's why we've been here since 1945 and 1946 is to help farmers reach their conservation goals and to support you all. And so if you have any questions as you fill out your application, please don't be a stranger. We're here to help you, and we want to make sure that your proposal is as successful as it can be. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. And I will be in touch with a follow-up email, just with a kind of a list of the resources that we shared in the chat, as well as a recording. And, feel free please do not be a stranger. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But I'll stick on the call for a few more minutes if anyone has any closing questions. But I hope you all have a fantastic evening, and thanks so much again for joining us.